And we're not going to hit on you.
Yeah.
And we're not
gonna
afraid
make it fucking weird.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Fuck Yeah, the podcast where we say fuck yeah to kink with friends. I am one of your hosts, Sarah, and I am joined by my co-host who is aging with grace.
Thank you.
Our glorious Leo birthday queen, Robin.
That's right. The big 45.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
How you doing today, Robin?
I'm good. I do feel like I'm a couple octaves lower from last night and all the yelling. That's how I like it too. But yeah, there was so much yelling. I had to stop screaming so that I could actually do this. I was thinking about you and our listeners and being like, you know what? I got to stop screaming because I will not be able to record tomorrow.
What were you screaming about?
What could it have been? Well, it's only my fuck yeah. Was literally my birthday last night, which we're recording on Sunday. So it was on Saturday. And we went to, I'm going to say it correctly. I was getting it wrong that night. What did I keep saying? I said Drag Stars All Race. We went to Drag Race All Stars
live
show. Yeah. And it was great. I had a great time. I had a really good time. And the energy, I was shocked at how into it everyone was. It was like, it felt like it was like the Beatles, like you know what I mean? Like people were losing their minds. And I was, of course, included in that. And it was just really nice to have so much joy over this kind of performance and to see, I mean, it was a big theater. It's not the biggest, but it was a legit balcony. What are those little things that stick out? Those little special box seats.
Oh, I know. The box seats on the side.
They're beautiful.
Wait a minute. I need to sit there. I think this might have been my first time at the Orpheum.
I had never been to the Orpheum.
In Los Angeles, which is pretty iconic. If you've seen shots of downtown, it's got a really classic old marquee.
Yeah.
And then we walked inside and I realized I haven't been here.
It was beautiful. It had Pantages vibes, It's, just the old Hollywood vibes.
Glam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really great. It was great. And I got done up, which I was happy about. And I always do this thing of like, oh, should I put all this effort into it? And then I'm like, why not? And then I did.
If anyone is curious to see Robin's Drag Race All-Stars costume extravaganza from last night, you just go to our Instagram because it is there. You recreated a Got Mick look from this season.
Yeah.
And I showed up at dinner late, which I hate. Oh my gosh, I hate it so much. We were running really late.
You weren't even that
night.
late.
It felt pretty late for me.
Yeah.
And you were sitting at the table with a couple of our friends, and I was floored actually at your black pearled horns.
Yeah.
That you had created this kind of like latex headpiece with the horns, and then you'd done the black pearling. And it was exceptional.
Thank you.
Your outfit last
Thank
night.
you. I slapped it together. I started working on it the night before, and what made me really happy, thank you. Part of what made me really happy is that I bought nothing to make this outfit. And because when I saw that that outfit in particular that Got Mick did with the black pearls and the horns and the sheer cat suit and all this stuff and the skeletal stuff. I ended up not wearing skeleton things, but I have like this necklace that's very like rib cagey, black pearl. And it made me feel really good that I can basically, it's not the exact same at all, but it's definitely an impression of the same silhouette and same vibes that I just have it in my arsenal at
Yeah,
this
I
point.
feel like if anyone needs insight into the things that you have on hand, just go to the Instagram and look at the costume and then realize that this is something that was slapped together
Right.
in like an evening just from things you had. It's amazing. And I just had a vision as you were talking where I think you would do really well on Drag Race.
Stop.
No, I do. It just came to me of you've got acting chops.
Mm-hmm.
You are pretty funny. I mean, I think that the pressure of the show, I can't quite imagine how these folks handle it, except that they're such seasoned performers.
Right.
But you have all of the skills. Maybe some of the dance challenges would be hard because they
Maybe.
really do some pretty rigorous dance routines. Like you'd have to, I think the thing that the people who never take a sewing class before they go on the show, I'm like, you're going to have to sew, girl.
Right.
Like, why didn't you take a class? You would probably have to take a couple hip hop dance classes before going on Drag Race.
Well, and I've always wanted to learn how to do a death drop, but at this point it scares me. Like I would break myself.
Yeah. When I see them do it, my knees go, ow.
I saw somebody do an explanation of how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's actually, you're just doing something ungraceful very quickly.
Right.
And it's really all about your back leg bringing you down. Mm-hmm. But I can do like that kind of knees back bent over in yoga or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you saying that because what in particular with the Got Mick thing, the aesthetic of Got Mick, I mean, is like, I'm very into it. And then, but the nature of like a trans man being on that show, and it just always felt like I've always wanted to be a drag queen, but always felt like it wasn't my arena or space to be in. And it's like more like, well, I could do drag king stuff, but it is like, I am more interested in that kind of high femme glamour when it comes to that stuff. Yeah. So there was like a thing with Got Mick that I'm just getting into the Drag Race world, which I know I'm really behind, and now I'm gobbling it all up. Like being invited to this and having tickets for it really gave me the deadline that I needed to finally like watch Drag Race, because
like watch a whole season.
Yeah. And there's like a whole variety of reasons why I haven't gotten into it, but I know it's like one of these things I should have a long time ago. And now that I'm in it, I'm just like eating it up so much. And I'm back on like season 2 of All Stars now, and just watching like Alaska and the way she talks and like all this. And I'm like, oh my God. And then Detox. And so I know that there's like this bigger world.
Yeah.
And that, like people were talking about, like, I think it's Violet Chachki that got mixed dating, and that there's a lot of influence from that. And so I'm interested to find out what she's all about as well. So, but that there's like a trans masculine person that is in the drag queen world and being accepted on that level, like kind of blew it open in my mind, where it's again one of these things where I was like, if I was 20 today, I think I might have like a different road than I did like being 20 in the year 2000,
Well, I think that if you went back and watched Got Mick's season, it's a really nice storyline on that season. I actually really like Got Mick from their original season way better than on All Stars. Like so when All Stars 9 started, Got Mick was my number 1 pick.
Yeah.
And over the course of the season, aside from the relationship with Vanjie,
right?
I mean, because Vanjie just has my heart. Vanjie. I love her so much.
She was so great last night.
She's one of the few that are not the weirdo queen. So like my top queens are Willow Pill, like Evie Oddly, Jinx, Monsoon for sure, is just amazing. Like her arc of her career is so amazing. I loved Got Mick on his season. And then Vanjie. I am not someone who has a lot of love for celebrities.
Mhm.
You know, my mom was in film and would regularly ask me, "Oh, do you want to come on set and meet so and so and this person?" And I never, even as a teenager,
Mhm.
was not interested. There is something about Banji that hits so deep in my soul. I told Andrea last night when we were driving home, I want her to come and I just want to cuddle her.
Yes.
And ask her, can I make you food? What do you need? She has this tenderness
Yes.
to her,
Like a vulnerability
and authenticity.
Yeah.
Oh, I just fucking love her so much. So the fact that they really bonded on this season, I loved that storyline. But I didn't love Gottmik as much as I did on his original season.
He seemed
I
stiff.
think, yeah, I think you would be really into his storyline because at first he is nervous about telling the girls that he is a trans man.
Yeah.
And you just see him blossom once he owns his identity and it's embraced by the queens on the show. And it's just, so I agree with you that the evolution that Drag Race has taken is pretty awesome. I like seeing it on screen. I also like just having a connection to that community of people that I just feel like in my personal life these days I don't really like. I don't have very many gay men in my life like I have at different points. One thing I do want to call out though, I loved the show last night, and they called a little girl up who was 10, Zay, and then once she picked her drag name, it was Zay Zay, and she was in the quick drag moment. They picked 3 people from the audience to come up and do quick drag and perform, and she performed on this Orpheum stage. Huge stage. I mean, just the bravery, and she's basically the same age as Ruby, so I was just screaming my head off for her.
No contest winner.
Yeah, hands down winner. She had all the moves. She clearly practices like in her room, in her mirror. There were so many highlights of the show for me last night. And then there is also always this thing in the back of my head that it is a huge money-making enterprise. And that's equally clear in the shows. I mean, it's brilliant, the cookie cutter kind of framework that I think that they've created for the show.
The formulas.
Yeah, the formula is, you know, I get like RuPaul and his whole crew, World of Wonder, have tapped into how do we repurpose our content. And so there's clips from throughout the season that are played on the big screen, and then it's kind of used as fodder for how they weave the show together, which is nice because it's not disparate parts. Like it's actually a fully integrated drag show, and the drag is at such a high level that it's just superb. And you've got these people like Vanjie who you've fallen in love with, who you get to see live.
But then to get to see like the wings in person of Plastique.
Oh, yes. I mean, getting to see Plastique's fashion on a live stage is unreal. We were talking about her silicone corset that helps her, like snatches her whole body, but it's somewhat invisible. It's just the level of drag is totally beyond. And there's also advertisement built into the fucking live show.
Yeah, like we watched 2 full-on commercials.
Yeah.
And at first it bothered me. Like, I'm glad you're bringing it up because at first I was like, whoa, like, okay, I am here at a TV show. This is like a promotion for the TV show on one level. And then a promotion for like the mocktails and cocktails of like, what is it called? The
House of Love.
House of Love.
Cocktails. And then the book that they have created. So it is.
Right. But, and then they're promoting their merch and everything. And then, but it was really the merch part that made me think a little bit more of like, there is, I think, inherent in the drag queen art form that there's hustle. It's a lot like strippers in a way. Like there's this level of like sex worker hustle that even at this like peak tippy top level, they're still hustling. And I was thinking about like,
they kind of, I think, have to though.
Oh, 100%.
Because I do think that the business structure of it is probably that World of Wonder really makes the bulk of these profits. And that's where I get a little like, we probably need to be going to their individual shows and supporting them.
Right.
Direct.
Or the importance of actually buying the merch, which Andrea pointed out. And I was like, it all kind of made more sense because it's like when you're at a drag show, or you're at a strip show, there's a certain amount of like, you're showing your appreciation through money.
Yes.
And once I kind of framed it in that way, I did not mind the level of hustle that was at that show. Because then I was like, if I just put it into this other kind of context in my mind, it's still within like what we really expect from a drag show. And they are out there hustling, especially on this. I don't know how much they get paid per episode. I know there's got to be some fee that they get, especially on this season where it was all for charity. So I know they're getting something, but it can't be
it's not
equivalent to the amount that they're putting into it. Or like, and we haven't looked it up, but a friend of ours was telling us that Plastique spent like $250,000 on clothing for the season.
Yeah.
And so beyond whatever, she could have earned from the show, even if it was like going straight to her. So this is like the space where they make the money. And so I do feel good about supporting that on whatever level, and I'll sit through the commercials, and I would buy one of those cocktails or mocktails if I saw it. I don't know where to get it other than the Orpheum. So it's interesting.
I mean, long story short, we had a great time last night.
It was so great.
We screamed
so much. It was so loud.
It was so loud. I loved, they did the same thing that happened at the Madonna show, which is at the pre-show music. There wasn't a live DJ, which would have been very cool, actually. That would have been a nice addition. They had club music playing, and we talked about the Charlie XCX album and how deep I'm in it right now. Just it turned something on and turned something up in my body that is so fun. There is one more call out I want to make. Because you were talking about the death drop, and I know that we're going to have Elliot on soon, who is a go-go dancer and Mr. LA Leather and just a very multifaceted individual. I'm so excited to talk to Elliot. But I also know that Elliot knows how to do the Roxy Andrews ass slapping. And you know what? We needed some lessons. Robin, I need someone to come on the podcast.
There'll be some amazing
who's
audio.
Going to teach you how to death drop.
Yes. Okay.
And is going to teach me how to clap my ass cheeks. Y'all, this is a serious call out right now. I need this. I saw this recently in a burlesque show that we went to for Tina Horn's book launch.
Yes.
Tina's new book, Why Are People Into That? Investigation into kink. It's so fucking good. Get the book. But for the book launch event, there was a burlesque show, and all the young burlesque girlies are clapping their ass cheeks.
Yeah.
And Roxy Andrews just does it on command. And I'm like, okay, this is a skill I need to learn how to do this.
Yeah. I think you have the ass for it.
I don't think I have the ass for it necessarily, but I think I have the will to learn.
I think it takes a little bit of both. I think you got both.
Oh yeah, my gosh.
It was fantastic. I loved it. There was a point, like, I don't know if other people get this, but so I dressed up, like really dressed up.
Yeah.
And I love doing that. And I've discovered in myself, I think it is like part of my fetish. But there's like a certain point where I guess I kind of expected a few more people to be really dressed up. I would say it was like 1% of people were really dressed up. And I was a little shocked.
I was too.
It's not that people were like sloppy or anything, but it was just like, gay casual. And so there's a certain point where I'm like sitting there just going like, in my horns, like completely bedazzled. Like I get like a certain tinge of like embarrassment, and then I have to talk myself out of it. And I'm like, am I just like the biggest nerd, like drag nerd or something, because or it's like a cause, but it's also like, I think a level of like just what I really enjoy. And it's like a fetish, and it's like just fun to go out and be Like, when else do you do that?
I think if you were doing it more regularly, either as part of your hustle,
right?
Because Jada Essence Hall was there last night.
Yeah.
And she was not in drag, right? And I would imagine that a lot of these folks who are doing this very high level of drag are like, I only if you're paying me, right?
Right,
Am I
right.
showing
Yeah.
up? And so I think it is, you're using it as an outlet.
Right.
And when I used to do a lot of costumed appearances at things, it was because I was very called to put that effort in, and it never felt like effort.
Right.
I think at a certain point it might, as you're developing your drag persona and stuff, you might be like, no, I'm only doing it for special, like super special occasions. But I think having that outlet to be able to try your fashions on and express yourself, and it was your fucking birthday.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also the thing of like watching it. Most of the time I'm sitting there going like, how would I do it? Or how do they do that makeup? Like, I did do a totally different style of makeup. Like, I had it basically like the wing went over my eyebrow to hide it. And then I drew the eyebrows above, and like I did the white eyeliner under for the very first time. I mean, coming from the 90s, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's just been coal black for so long.
Yeah.
And so, but it was just really fun to do that, like to just extend your eye forward in that way and to just play it. It's just art stuff.
Yeah.
So I love it. And then seeing them on stage, like it's so kind of silly and so gender fuckery, but so beautiful and bold and powerful, like all at once. Like I got a little overwhelmed by, and also the crowd freak out. And also there was a moment of like talking about voting and being very overt. Felt so good.
And we haven't even mentioned that Shanell
was
is
so great.
Quite literally the best host.
So good.
I was so thrilled to see her in her element, because that kind of stuff doesn't come through on the screen.
No.
That's the element of drag. Sometimes when there's lip syncs that someone wins that I don't agree with or whatever, I'm like, there must be something in this live performance element that doesn't translate through the screen, because Ru, I completely disagree with you. Or, I mean, I know sometimes he makes just strategic decisions, but Shanell was absolutely incredible. She is funny. She is able to improv, and she wove the political in a way that was so fantastic. She had that little 10-year-old up on stage and never made her feel uncomfortable, but also didn't mute or downplay the like drag culture language. Like she was being very kind of flirty with one of the contestants, but it was, gosh, she can just weave a show together. No one's business.
100%. And that's the moment where I was like, okay, now I understand why Shanell was on the show.
Yeah.
It's not just because I felt bad for Shanell, and it felt a bit like a pity party.
There were a few. I mean, that
and like they were throwing her a bone,
Yeah.
But then on that stage, I was like, for me, she was the most dynamic.
Oh, 100%. Well, and what's interesting is that the fashions are so hard for the runway if you are a stage queen.
Right.
And some of her wigs on the show, I was like,
yeah, it's old school.
It doesn't work. It doesn't translate to this stage. And I don't know if you know, I mean, they actually all had different wigs. I thought most of them upgraded their wigs, except for Vanjie, sadly. Like I didn't love her wig as much as like her wigs on the show, but Shanell definitely upgraded her. I think once she saw some of them on TV, she was like, oh, actually I could go bigger and more fabulous with this. Her magic is feeding off of a crowd.
Ad-libbing.
Oh God, yeah, she was amazing. It was so good.
And to like kind of get into our topic today, there's one thing that I thought they did really well with the 10-year-old girl, where they did not sexualize her.
Not at all.
Okay. Even like Vanjie, I came out and ended up singling out Zay again, because I don't think Vanjie realized
her on a little catwalk.
Yeah, but like took her on a catwalk and everything. And Vanjie was being very like sexualizing herself, but never with the girl.
She was everyone was not protective, of Zay, but very encouraging in a way that is appropriate for kids.
Yes.
Like, feel yourself.
Yeah.
Feel your confidence. Let's go on this power catwalk.
Right. Yeah.
But not like, shake your thing.
Right. It felt more like
so
feminist than exploitative.
Or like aunties. It had auntie vibes whenever anyone was interacting with Zay.
It was very
And
sweet.
Zay's mom was there with her and was a big Vanjie fan. And so then Zay got on the mic and said, Vanjie, my mom loves you. And then Vanjie went over and hugged mom. And it was very sweet.
It was very, very sweet.
Yeah.
And I think that this is like something that a lot of people that, like, for example, haven't worked in the pleasure industry or any sort of sex industry, a lot of people that don't have a lot of sex or pleasure education have difficulty with is being able to be sexual yourself or be feeling yourself in a sexual way, or being able to talk about sex without sexualizing the other people in the room. You know what I mean? Like, this is a key difference that I've like had trouble with. Like, for example, long time ago, more than a decade ago, I remember being at the Pleasure Chest and training someone new who only lasted a couple days, because that's how they worked at the Pleasure Chest. It was like, and I'm sure it's like this at a lot of sex shops, where you're either going to last 2 days or you're going to last 10 years.
Yeah.
So they get weeded out pretty fast. And so I was training this person, and I think I was talking about like the Pure Wand or something, and how the weight of it works and all this stuff. And I was describing it. And then after, he was like, oh, so, and that turns you on? Like, looking at me this way. And I was just immediately like, oh, no, bro.
Oh, you don't get it.
You don't get it.
Yeah. This isn't a space for you to come and engage erotically with anybody.
Exactly. And so I was telling him about my personal experience with the toy and being used to being able to talk in that environment without being sexualized myself, or without engaging in a sexualized conversation with the other person, just talking about my sexual experience. And I just think it's an interesting thing to be able to do that a fair amount of people have not occurred to them to do.
Well, I think it's when you integrate all parts of yourself, the same with eroticism or gender presentation or gender as performance, right? Once you realize that these different aspects of your wholeness comprise your wholeness, then it no longer becomes weird to be able to navigate spaces. It's when you keep things like, something that you perceive as like a non-normative gender identity or your sexuality as these very compartmentalized, these are things that I must have shame about and that can't get integrated into my wholeness, then your discomfort shows. And I think that that's like a lot of what we're seeing in I would actually argue in politics right now, a lot of this is being used as fodder and fear mongering and moral panic.
Because shame is a powerful tool
to control power and control the narrative. But it is easy to play on these fears because so many people do not integrate their whole sense of self. And so once you do that, whether it's just, like for us working in the sexuality space, we're not going to shame you for the questions that you have. And also, we're not going to have any shame around openly sharing information that may be helpful to you in your journey.
Right. And we're not going to hit on you.
Yeah.
And we're not afraid
make it
to
fucking weird.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's the real safety of being able to talk about your sexual experiences, is that one, you won't be shamed, and two, you won't be obligated to then, like, I don't know, perform sexually for someone just because you talked about sexuality. And I think it's like what you're saying. It is those like hidden parts of ourselves that I guess it's like if you can't say the words without giggling or be able to talk about your sexuality without it's a weird, complicated thing.
Well, okay, this leads perfectly into a question that I have for you for this week. Because there's something that you were talking about last week that brought up a lot of curiosity for me.
I love that. Anytime I make you curious, I feel very, very happy with myself.
And I do think maybe it is a little bit of this like whole self-integration. We've kind of gotten to it organically, where you were talking about having a play party this summer, which sadly I could not attend, and playing with friends. And I think you were describing, there was nudity and but it was not weird, right? Like we didn't make it weird. We were, at least with the person that you were describing, I don't know who else you played with, but
it didn't get weird with anybody.
That it just felt really natural to be in this space and be engaging through kink in a way that kind of, this is maybe my editorializing on it, but this is what I heard and what I received from what you were saying, is it's sort of walking this line between, you're not going fully into the erotic space with, at least in these play sessions you had at this play party, because you're still upholding some boundaries around like your sexuality and theirs.
Right.
But clearly it's also not platonic, because you are opening up kind of another layer of bodily exploration with your friends.
Yeah.
So I have a question here somewhere. What I think I got curious about is that I haven't ever really been somebody who plays with friends. I like a lot of my friends make out with each other, dance the line a little bit, way more than I ever have. I have had deeply intimate platonic relationships. And I have had erotic connections that are friendlier than others. But my core friends, I don't play with.
Why?
This is
I'll turn the question on you.
Yeah. I think so. Because this brought up so much curiosity for me, I was asking myself some questions like, where does that come from? And I think that really, if I go back, the formation of my sexuality was really kind of hindered when I was younger. I had very low confidence and was like really programmed around certain roles and ways that sexuality could exist that were pretty restrictive. And so then once my sexuality really started cracking open, I think I had a fair amount of anxious, insecure attachment strategies that I was working through, that I still work through today. But it's just been a really long journey for me to kind of become aware of some of my anxious attachment in intimate relationships. So it's almost like once there's erotic intimacy, my anxious attachment gets triggered.
Right.
And so I think I'm able to actually fairly securely attach to friends.
Because there's not the sexual component.
And so introducing the erotic element probably is a boundary for me that that makes me very, I'm very protective of it because I don't necessarily trust myself to be able to manage that. Like, it's like I've got a pretty tight hold on this like intimacy piece. Erotic intimacy, I guess I should say.
Right.
Because I would say that we have a pretty intimate relationship.
Yeah.
But it's never it's never kind of danced into that erotic space.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume it has to do a little bit with my attachment stuff.
I wonder if you'd been able to come to that party, if we would have played.
Well, this was another question that
Because I would
came
love to
up
play
for
with
me, because I was like, oh, what would have happened if because, you know, when we had originally talked about the play party, I did have a kind of a ritual that I was
Yeah.
really excited about setting this like space, the container for everybody.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh, and then of course I will not play.
Right.
Like I'll help set the container. I'll be part of the energy, which I
Right.
love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a bit of a voyeur. I'm a bit of an exhibitionist as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I don't think I would have gotten into that headspace to play at the party.
I think it's a little bit comes down to how you categorize things. Like for some people, like you have no issue being nude around your friends.
Yeah.
And for some people, that would be crossing a line of intimacy that's just too much. And for me, like kink stuff is just, it's very friendly in my mind. It's just not, and a lot of my most intimate relationships didn't involve much kink. And I would like to change that in the future. But I think maybe because kink was like, I was introduced to it in large part through social scenes, like going to goth clubs.
Yeah.
The first goth club I think I ever went to was Bondage a Go-Go, if you all remember the 90s on Hollywood Boulevard. And but then also like getting into, I started working as a dom at 19. So it's like, it's just been something that I can do with a lot of different people. And in my mind, like most of the times that I've played has not been a sexual situation for me. It's been a playful, fun, kinky situation, but I didn't consider it intimate or sexual.
So do you think it's just conditioning, like behavioral conditioning?
It's almost like
it's
categorizing.
How you got it, how you were introduced to it, then kind of compartmentalized it into this space that isn't necessarily a space that you feel or experience as intimately erotic.
Yeah. I think it's partly, it's like a category for me that just feels like, in my mind, it's never been like, it's just, I could spank you now and it wouldn't, I mean, it would be fun and stuff, but I wouldn't think about it any more than if we did something else that was fun. You know, like if we went in the pool naked or something, it would be like on the same level where it's a little bit extra than what we might normally do.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't affect me in a way of like my feelings towards you. It might draw me closer to you, but not in a way of like what you're talking about with the attachment styles, which I think is partly in my past, it's almost working in reverse. Like it's a weird thing. I think my attachment is to just like, is to keep so much distance. And then once I get sexual with someone and I get into that tunnel vision, I'm very confused about my sexuality in general and like how all of it works. And I'm in this like new phase right now. So it's hard to like talk about how I am right now because I'm like rediscovering it. But there was something about the kink and once I was like really having sex with someone that I couldn't dom them. You know, I didn't feel comfortable doming them, but I think it's because I put myself in a very submissive not situation, but position
role. Yeah.
Once I got into that. And now I'm trying to
sexually.
Yeah. And a lot more traditional sexual stuff that I think I thought I had to do in order to like maintain a relationship or like keep a man or whatever. And now I'm interested in like in reframing what I even consider erotic, what I even masturbate to is very, very different. Like I used to find, for me personally, the idea of someone like eating my pussy not erotic at all. It was not something that I even was enjoying very much in general in live action, you know? And now it's like a key part of my turning me over into like orgasm land is thinking about it and not seeing it, not watching videos or anything, but just like thinking about it. And it's like, it's been very empowering in that way. So now I feel like, because I used to not be able to understand, like, how can I be dominant and then be penetrated? It did not compute in my mind. And also, I was not computing that penetration would maybe not even be part of it. Like, I just was like stuck in this mindset when it came to my sexuality. So now it'll be interesting to see how it changes. But kink was always this way that I could have this like character side of myself, what I think in retrospect is like a drag queen side of myself, of this like Mary Typhus, like villainous person. And to wear the outfits, to be able to like basically do my form of drag and have my character and be this person. I just didn't know how to integrate that with my sexuality. So it's just a very like, it's, what's that, well used muscle or something. But then I have been able to do it. I have had a fair amount of sex with friends, and that's been okay also. But it doesn't get super, super intimate. Like you just saying, like making out with friends, that sets a little ping in me where I'm like, oh, that seems like too intimate. Like kissing, but it's almost like that Pretty Woman, like I don't kiss, kind of thing, where I think that actual intimacy is much scarier to me than like spanking a person. It's just a different spot in my brain.
Yeah, I think I have a much more, especially by now, a much more developed muscle around like erotic intimacy than I do around casual kink. And I do think that roles are you were mentioning like once you're getting intimately erotic, you now are kind of not in a dom headspace. And I feel similar to that in the way of like there is a submissive quality in me that I don't consent to, that I don't choose to share in kink spaces. Typically, that is something that is very reserved for like intimate erotic.
Because of the vulnerability?
I guess it's like almost a gift that I feel like I give to people.
Yeah, it's special.
It's like you have to earn it for sure. It's become a sticking point actually in some of my sexual relationships where it's like, you've kind of lost your privileges.
Right. You got to step it up if you don't.
If you don't handle it well.
Yeah.
And you don't. You
got to respect it.
Yeah. It's like, it definitely is like a mindset that has to be, kind of nurtured and earned and those sorts of things, like for me to be able to get into that mindset.
Right.
So it is not, it feels, being submissive feels very intimate to me. And so therefore I think in kink spaces, I'm like, no, this is not how I like to, this is a side of me that feels more private. And so then, when I think of kink, but also like I don't really play with friends. Right. So it's like kink is this very kind of delicate balance of like, there has to be a certain level of emotional separation.
Right.
But then also a certain level of intimacy for me so it's it's like fits in this very specific box. And certainly like I don't explore it a lot outside. I mean, I'm in a very monogamous relationship. Right. So we don't really have terms for exploring outside of our relationship. So I think if I were like, being in kink spaces is really important to me. And I want to be able to play in these ways. Like certainly it's something that we could negotiate. I am curious about this thing for like folks who really just kink in the bedroom. Do you think that kink with friends is something that can be learned, or are there like tools for being able to go into kink spaces and like navigate that with people that you are really friendly with?
I think kink is actually really set up to do it because it's so negotiation and consent based. So if you're doing that kind of like quote unquote ethical kink, then I think it makes sense. Like especially if a couple was saying like, oh, we want to explore a little bit more, but we're like not ready to be like an open marriage or something. I feel like kink is a great way to like be able to explore a little bit and release that valve, release the pressure of the monogamy if that's an issue, because it's so rules oriented and so boundary oriented, much more than like swinging or something, which comes, I think, with a certain expectations of what's going to occur, unless I'm misunderstanding swinging. But it's like,
yeah, I think there's a lot more sex in swinging. So what do you think is because in my mind, the key elements, if you are wanting to expand really into kink play in general, but particularly if you're kind of navigating, say, like new dynamics with friends, I would imagine that the two elements that are the most important for making that kind of crossover, say, with a friend, is the initial negotiation and actually just kind of feeling what the energy is between the two of you once you start talking about these things. But then I would say that the debrief is even more important, like how you transition out of the scene and back into your day. I mean, did you feel like you had to do any kind of debrief with anybody that you played with at the party?
Not a debrief. We didn't really debrief that much. No, but I mean, we did do some talking beforehand, but I think partly because I was fairly familiar with everybody, there was a fair amount of trust that boundaries were somewhat known and not going to like cross into certain spaces. But we did talk beforehand about like what's off limits, what do you definitely not want to be feeling? Is there anything that you're particularly interested in? And then just playing, but a lot of checking in also. So I check in throughout about how is something feeling and this and that. Do you like more of this, less of that? And in that way, it almost feels like you're giving like a really nice massage to someone.
Yeah.
So, and that's very friendly, I feel like also. So it's more like body work in that situation.
So funny, because I don't think a massage is being friendly either.
Does it feel sexual if you're like a friend's giving you a massage, or it just feels intimate?
Yeah, I guess I think of it as sort of the like, I mean, I certainly get massaged a fair amount, but the exchange is I'm paying for it.
Right.
And then the only other massage that's in my life is semi erotic,
right,
very loving touch with my partner.
But you ever like just had a friend to start working your shoulders while you're hanging out for some reason, like you're watching a movie and they
Not very often.
Maybe I just complain about my neck enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen to me all the time.
Let me massage you.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because there was one point where a good friend put my foot in his mouth, and I was shocked.
Not at the play party or at the play party?
At the play party.
Okay. And it was shocking?
I was shocked that because it was like I had been working everybody over and he had wanted to play with me, and I really would love to play with him. But I had already played with like 5 people, and it was probably like 1 a.m. And I was like, I just got to get off of my feet. And so he was giving me a foot massage, and then whoop, like my foot went into his mouth. And it was interesting because I think if we had negotiated, I might have said no to it, because I used to do a ton of foot sessions and they're easy and fine, but I didn't particularly enjoy having my foot in other people's mouths, but I enjoyed that.
Well, I mean, everything is changing for you, right?
Everything's changing and I'm open to all of it.
Yeah.
And it was like, it did have like a sexuality to it that I was surprised about, because it was, I think it was being done for my pleasure and not because I was getting paid for them to get off on my feet,
Right.
which has been every single
part
other
of the
time.
Foot massage.
It was part of and it was an excellent foot massage.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize like how much the massage was part, because we were just talking about that and it didn't even ring about that. But yeah, it was an excellent foot massage. And it was an excellent, like, foot in the mouth. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess I like this now.
But it might have just been that context.
I think it was that context. I mean, I've thought about it since. So.
Ooh.
But, it's also not been a pressure to do it again. But I know that it's like not off the table should circumstances arise again. It's very circumstantial. It's very container oriented. Yes.
Well, and that's the interesting thing that I think the curiosity has bubbled up for me of like, oh, what would have happened? Because I probably would not have gone to that play party having had a negotiate. Well, no, that's not true. I would have talked to Andrea about something before going.
Don't you think Andrea would come?
Not necessarily. I don't want to speak for her.
Right.
Maybe she would.
Well, she better after this conversation.
She's not, I mean, I think everyone feels differently about kink spaces. And I think some kink spaces, and I will certainly say the same for me, that I've gone into have been not traumatizing. That's a little heavy-handed, but a little much. And I think that like, especially in the early 2000s, I want to say until really much more recently, people go into spaces without there being sufficient community agreements. And so the assumption is that you're walking into the space, and by walking into the space, you're consenting to everything.
Right.
And so I don't know that a lot of the kink spaces that Andrea has been in have been particularly conscientious containers.
Yeah.
So I don't think that she goes like, oh, let's find play parties to go to. Right.
Yeah.
And, so yes, I think I probably would have made some assumptions that my boundaries were pretty firm going into your play party, and that I wouldn't have done a high level negotiation with my partner beforehand. So then probably I might have been actually really moved, because that is the thing, is that the energy of a space is very influential for me.
Yeah.
So there have been, like summer music festivals that I've been at that have felt like very safe spaces. And I crack open in a way where the way that I'm engaging with people really changes in that container. So I do think that had I been at the party, that my questions about this might be a little different, because it does sound like the energy that you all created there was really special. And I do know that you had someone do a ritual to start the event. And I think that that's something that more people should do at play parties, because I do think that it's setting an intention before anything you do is really powerful.
Yeah.
And when a group does it together, it can help kind of neutralize some of the elements that I think cause people to act out in those kinds of spaces.
And who you invite.
100%.
Because it's all part of that, like who's going to honor it and who's going to bring the vibes and everything. Because like in the early 2000s, I definitely went to multiple play parties that just turned me off to the whole thing in general. Yeah. Where there's like, the guy who's wearing chains and it's constantly jingling because he's just masturbating in the corner. Yeah. And you're like, this is not what I'm looking for.
Yeah. When you think about that kind of like somatic experience.
Right.
It's not that it's threatening, but as you described that, it reminds me of like being in tattoo studios. And then, so you've got the sound of the gun, but then when you add a cacophony of men's voices on top of that kind of like penetrating needle sound,
right?
Suddenly it's like, this doesn't feel awesome.
I love this description. Yeah. And so like making a space where I mean, part of what that party was so great about is feeling into myself and what I want from that party and then creating that. Like there was the outdoor element.
Yes.
There was the perfect lighting. There was the perfect music.
Yeah.
There was the water element. And then there's the play space.
List.
And then the invite list that were people that I felt comfortable being naked in front of, and like I'm being appreciated and not exploited, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the big difference, I think.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because I feel like the way that you're talking about the kink stuff is basically how I feel about sex parties, or like you've described an event, like when you were talking about the summer music festival thing, where you did, I can't remember what it was called, but like where basically everybody's like showing vulva and like getting into G-spot stuff,
when I
right?
did hands-on G-spot workshops in the woods.
And I trust that if I was there in the woods, I would be able to open up and be able to maybe do that. But the idea of doing that sort of thing in front of other people makes me clam up. And so I feel like maybe we have like just the way that we're able to interact with sexuality and intimacy is just like kind of in these different orbs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because this definitely, like, there are some things that push up against my edges.
Yeah.
When I think about going into a space with all these beloved people that I know, and then introducing the element that we might play together. But it definitely does not push up against my edge to think about creating a container where everyone's coming together to learn. And I trust myself to establish a space where people then feel comfortable to take out the speculums, explore their own bodies, and and allow me in to give some instruction.
So in that case, it's really the education aspect that is your in. Because if it wasn't the education part of it, if it was just how many people were there? Do you think you had like 10?
I did 2 of them.
Yeah.
So I think that there were about 20 people at one of them,
right,
and then maybe closer to 10 at another.
So let's say it was the same 20 people.
Yeah.
And you're out in the woods, but the education part is taken out. It's just there that you're all going to enjoy your vulvas together. Would that feel comfortable? Or is the education part like kind of a necessary component?
That's a great question. I do think if it's like a solo exploration and then we're sharing with each other, I think when I put myself as the participant, it becomes I think it really is very brave for people to go into spaces where they're willing to be in a learning space and take their clothes off. Like that's a level of bravery that that takes more bravery than it does for me to go into the space as an educator and like the space holder.
Right.
Truly.
Yeah. I totally agree.
So yes, I think that if we were to get together a group of 10 people, say we know all of them, and we're going to like explore our vulvas together, like we would have to as a group do some really nice intention setting for me to feel comfortable in that space.
Yeah, likewise. That would be a hardcore thing for me to like. I would do it. I would trust that you could create that. I'd be like open to it. But okay, so that same day that I threw the play party, another friend of the pod, who I won't mention, anyway, had a birthday party that was a sex party. And a bunch of people that went to because that was during the day, went to that sex party and then came to my party.
Okay.
And they
brought all their sexy sex energy.
Right. But the way that they were talking about it, first of all, they said that the space was amazing and it's a woman-owned space, queer space, I think, she just decided like, I want to have like a sexy sex space that feels safe and is like, for women and queers. And apparently it's awesome. But again, like they're also describing it's like all of these like fucking, beds and stuff. And people are fucking.
Yeah.
And to me, like it sets off like a squeamish of like, I think that's too much for me. But then the way that they were describing it, I got hyped about it. And I'm like, okay, maybe there actually is a space where I could feel comfortable like fucking in front of a bunch of people. Like, I don't know. I'm open to it now. Whereas before I heard their reviews of it, I was like, no. But like, I don't know. Maybe we should go, Sarah. Apparently they're
See,
throwing
the
parties.
thing is I love human sexuality.
Right.
I love observing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I love experiencing my true sexuality and desires with other people.
I don't know if I can let go enough to actually enjoy it. You know, like I've been in group sexual situations and I've always felt pretty uptight and like performative. But I've always felt that way with kink too. And this like particular kink party though was very, I mean, kink's always been more casual, but this kink party, I did not feel performative. I felt embodied in it. And I'm just working on that in general.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's like a part of it with the sexuality, but you know, time will tell. We'll find out.
Well, this is, I think, great fodder for a future episode because I don't think that we fully answered one of my questions, which is like, is this something kind of just inherent for certain people? Is it a learned comfort, behavior, comfort,
nature and nurture,
and so forth? Is it something that you can actually prepare for? Or is it sort of one of those things where it's spontaneous and the space just brings these things out in us that allow us to open up in ways that we maybe haven't before, wouldn't expect ourselves to? So I'd be really curious to get someone on the podcast specifically who either hosts or takes part in kind of group sex dynamics. Because I'd be really interested, you know, like what was the process of really getting comfortable with doing that and becoming embodied?
Yeah.
And this performance versus like authentic participation. Because yeah, for me, I have experienced or participated in a lot of performance that is sexual in nature. And that I have no problem with.
Yeah.
When there's a divide, there's a stage, and I am like embodying what it is like to be comfortable in your sexuality as either educational purposes or for performance purposes. Totally.
Because there's a characterization there.
Yeah.
There's a boundary of your character.
Yep.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
When it gets to like, am I the person that's going to go to a whole bunch of like orgies?
Right.
No.
Because that's very like, that's just you laid out.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the realness.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Like when you're asking all of these questions, is this or this? And it's like, I think like the answer is like, yes. Unfortunately, it's like all of it.
Yeah.
But it's part of what's interesting about being a human is that it changes so much. I mean, our sexuality from when we first started engaging to now is so dramatic.
It is not a fixed entity.
No.
Yeah.
It's always curious and
I do think though, one of my takeaways from this is that there is a certain element of a learnedness about this. Like it does take practice to be able to, I mean, kink takes practice. Sex takes, all of these things are learned. Like we think that we're kind of like built in with some inherent aspects of our sexuality, which is very true. But then I think that gets conflated with like, oh, I should just know how to do this. And truly all of it is kind of learned.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can build the muscle memory around kink with friends.
I do think I have a bit of an overshare personality that's innate in me. Like I don't have a lot of the thing of like, I'm going to hold back. I always say too much. I always talk about things that I'm not supposed to talk about in inappropriate places. Like it's a standard that I think informs kind of my approach to kink and stuff. Or like even like wearing the horns and everything last night. I'm like, well, why not? You know, so that I think informs it a little bit. That's somewhat, I think, innate in me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a mystery, life.
Well,
human conditions.
Thank you for entertaining my questions.
I love that you asked me questions.
Feeding my curiosity. This was
feeding
so
my
lovely.
Leo heart by asking me things.
We are hoping that everyone is surviving this Mercury retrograde. We had an epic setup process today that took just as long as it took us to record this episode.
Woohoo.
Our hope is that we are going to have this video up on our Patreon.
Ooh.
And we are really hoping that you all will support this fiercely independent content that we create for you by joining our Patreon, patreon.com/fuckyapod. If for some reason there is no video this week, trust us when we say we are very committed to getting video happening. We believe we have gotten the setup right today, but really we won't know until we're done recording today.
Yeah, we'll find out if this gets edited out or not. I also just want to say, I would love to hear listeners' point of view on this subject of like the kink container, kink with friends, sex with friends, making out, all of that stuff. I would also love to know, like, who are your favorite drag queens and your favorite seasons of Drag Race? Because I'm going through the entire catalog now, and I kind of want to go in best to worst order. Is how I'm doing it.
Best to worst.
Yeah. So I'm kind of going through it, but I'm really interested in listener feedback, and we really would like to read some of your comments on the air, quote unquote. So please send us a note. You can email us at fyapod@gmail.com, or we're on Instagram.
You can also DM us, because apparently that's what all the kids do these days. The DM is where it's at. So we check our DMs on Instagram. TikTok. At Fuck Yeah Pod, TikTok at Fuck Yeah Pod. So find us on the socials, subscribe to our email list on our website, join us on Patreon. We want to,
like Sarah's mom did. So cute. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much for coming on this Fuck Yeah journey with us.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Fiercely Independent Media. Fuck Yeah Podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by Robin Jennings and Sarah Tom-Chesson, also known as my mom. Theme music is by She, Her, Sir, and Discofied by Robin Jennings. Your support means a lot. You can give to the show and receive perks at patreon.com/fuckyeahpod. You can also rate and review the show or share it with a friend. You can reach us at fyapod@gmail.com. Bye for now.